Welcome, everyone. Tonight, we're talking about Avigayil. And we have good news. There's a baby here that Jenna just told me about, Jenna and Elliot told me about, that's going to be in Avigayil. So you have to understand the story of Avigayil, because Avigayil is just incredible, really incredible. Avigayil is one of the seven prophetesses. Okay, now there really are more prophetesses. As I mentioned before, there actually throughout Jewish history, it says there were 600,000 male, 600,000 female prophetesses. There's seven that it says they were prophetesses in the Torah. Avigayil is one of the seven. Okay, so, and we're going to see the story of Avigayil because it's a very strange, very, very strange story. Avigayil is a prophetess. She's not only that, she is brilliant. She's brilliant, as we're going to see from the text and also other places where it talks about her brilliance. She's the prophetess. She's brilliant. She's called Isha Chachama, very wise. And Avigayil is considered to be one of the four most beautiful women that ever lived. Okay? The Talmud lists the four most beautiful women as Sarah, right? Rachav, which we talked about way back. Remember Rachav the harlot? She was the second of the most beautiful women. This doesn't include Chava, because Chava was not born, she was created by Hashem. So it was Sarah, then it was Rachav, and then the third of the most beautiful women ever was called Avigayil. Now the fourth is an argument. We're going to get to who the fourth is. The fourth, according to some opinions, it was Esther. So we'll get to Esther. According to some opinions, Esther was not that good looking. She just had a certain quality we'll discuss called chen and a certain type of beauty, but she was not objectively considered the most beautiful woman. And they would, some would say Esther, some would say Vashti. We'll get to that later. But here we're talking about Avigayil. So Avigayil is brilliant, prophetess, and one of the four most beautiful women ever. Now, the bizarre thing about Avigayil is we're going to see in the story, which I didn't really find anyone discussing why this is. But Avigayil is apparently married to like the worst guy around. And that's a little bizarre. I mean, why should this woman who is so beautiful, so brilliant, a prophet, means she's a tzedekis also, why is she married to this guy we're seeing is really a disgusting person, as she herself says, which is very, very weird. You can't say it was an arranged marriage. It's not the halach. The law is that people have to agree to it. It's very hard to understand how she's married to this guy. We'll have to say, as the story unfolds, that Avigayil, this guy had tremendous potential, which he obviously did not reach in the story of who he was as her wife, as her husband. Okay, now I'm gonna start the story. Okay, those who want to follow along, it's in the book of Shmuel 1, Aleph, chapter 25, verse 2. This is a story about David. King David has been ordained as the king. He's been anointed as the king by Shmuel, but it's in secret. And that's the whole wild story for those who've learned the book of Shmuel with us, that David has got to hide from Shaul. Shaul has gone crazy. He's melancholy, whatever they call it, Ruach Ra, and he's paranoid about David. And on one hand, good reason, because David has been anointed to become the king of Israel. Shaul did a certain sin. He lost the power to be the king. David's anointed, but David has tremendous, tremendous respect for Shaul, and he wouldn't touch a hair on his head. But David's got to run away from Shaul because Shaul wants to kill him, and Shaul is not fully there. Again, but remember, David has been anointed. Now, here's the story. So it says, David went down to this place, this area, and he gathered around him, these men gathered around him. The text says there were people who were kind of like, they were Anshe Matzok. They had a beef. They had a problem. Gathered around David was like a sort of a, I don't want to say a hooligan army, but some kind of army of people who were malcontents. 600 men that were malcontent, and they were, but I mean, I would say they were righteous people, but they had problems with the establishments, put it that way. So now David is in this area, and it says that there was a guy in this area of Carmel, and he was a very wealthy man. He had a tremendous amount of sheep. 3,000 and 1,000 goats, and came time to do the shearing of his sheep. Was a whole ceremony that people did, and it made it that it was a celebration. Okay, this guy's name is Naval. Okay, I want you to remember that Naval, Nun Bet Lamed, Naval. Which, if you start to hear the words, are funny. The word Naval is like the word Nevela. Nevela is like an animal that is slaughtered and is not kosher. It's called a nevela. It's disgusting. Naval is disgusting. That's his name. Okay. Now, his wife's name was Avigayil, and she was an Isha Tova Seichel, a brilliant woman, a woman of tremendous understanding, Yifas Torah and beauty. But the man, it says, was kasha v'ra. He was hard and bad. Ma'alalim v'hu kalbi. And he's a kalbi. Now, what's a kalbi mean? You all know the word kelev. Well, also know the word kalev. Kalev was one of the spies, and he was a very righteous person. So the simple meaning of the text is he's a descendant of Kalev. Okay? So I'll get a question in a second. So he's a descendant of Kalev, which means a few things. Kalev is a very righteous person, so he's come from royal descent, but it also means he's David's relative. Okay, so that's what Kalbi. Now, the text that Ayala just actually said, the text, the word says Kalbo, not Kalbo, not Kalbi. It's read Kalbi, it's written Kalbo. Why is it written Kalbo? So the text says, because the word Kalbo is Kilibo, like his heart. Because the text says the man was bad. So there are people that act bad, but they got a good heart. So the text is telling us, no. He's bad, Kilibo. The text is written like his heart. He's bad in and out. And Avigayil's married to this guy. Also, the word kalbi is like a kelev, like a dog. And some commentators say that. The doc says that is because he acted like he was not a good guy. So you got this great woman married to this bad guy. Bizarre. Now, David hears that they're going to shear the sheep. Okay, he sends 10 of his men to go to Naval, okay, and to wish him well, and to say to him like this: we heard you're having this celebration, and I want you to go and give something, whatever you think is right, to give to my men. Okay, and you could ask your men, all the people, your shepherds, you're doing your whole shearing, that my men have guarded them. The whole time they were watching the sheep, we protected them, we took care of them, we watched them, and whatever you want, give us something, whatever, we need something. According to some commentaries, it was the day before Rosh Hashanah. And therefore, he was like, hey, we need to make Rosh Hashanah meal, according to the Talmud. So he asked him for something, and apparently it's for good reason, because we really took care of your sheep. We guarded your watchmen. We guarded them from animals. We protected them. We got them what they needed. And now, it's your party. It's your happy day. Give something along. Okay? So they tell us to Naval. Now, in verse 10, Naval says, me, David. Who's David? Who's David? I should listen to him. And me, Ben Yishai. And who's the son of Yishai? Okay? He says, today, a lot of slaves rebel against their masters. He's a nobody. He's a nothing. So he denigrates David. Now, even says, and remember, and you have to understand the history of this. Remember, David comes from Ruth. And as we discussed once before in the class on Ruth, there's a lot of discussion about Ruth. She was a Moabite. Moabites convert. So he disses him and he says like this. He goes, hey, he comes from Ruth, the Moabite. He's a nobody. He's a nothing. I'm going to give my food to this David guy. He's nobody. He's nothing. I'm going to give him my food, my bread. No way. So the servants of David go back, and they tell David, this is what he said. And now David says something. He says to everyone in verse 13, he says, get your swords, put on your swords, and we're going to take care of business. 400 men go to out, 200 men guard the he's going to kill Naval. Okay. Now, there's an obvious question here, right? Like, it's nice. Share, that's fair. I understand it's a good thing to do to share. I understand it's to have a karas tov, to have a thankful and appreciative, but it's kind of hard to hear how this gets the death penalty, not wanting to give him the food, even though David's men did protect him, but David's about to have him killed. Okay, so question one, how could that happen? So now it goes on like this. Now Avigayil, what happens at this point is the men, the shepherds of Naval, tell Avigayil what happened. They said, listen, it's true. David's men, they were the best thing. They guarded us, they protected us. And they came, they asked for some to share something. And Naval said this to him, and we can't tell Naval because he's a tough guy, and he's never going to listen to us. He's Ben Belial, he's a disgusting guy. He's not gonna... So they tell this to his wife. Now, in verse 18, Avigayil quickly goes. She takes all this bread and wine and sheep, and she brings all of these things down with her women. They go down to David. Yes, Avigayil goes with the women in verse 18. Her other ladies. They go and they bring all these things down to David. Okay, now it's going to get really kind of weird. So she goes down to David, and she tells her maidens, go before me, and I'll make sure that Naval doesn't stop you, and then I'll make sure everything's safe, and then I'll go down afterwards. Okay. All right, fine. Now, so then it says that in verse 20, she was riding on the chamor, on a donkey. And this is very weird. This next wording of the text, it says, "V'yoredes b'seisar har." She went in the hidden part of the mountain. I mean, the hidden part of the mountain. What does that mean? Should have just said, she came down the mountain. She came down the hidden part of the mountain, whatever that means. And then she runs to David and his men. And David is saying to himself, that's it. This guy treated me. I'm going to go and punish him. Okay? Now, and he's saying to himself, David, in verse 21 and 22, that he's going to wipe them out. He's going to wipe out Naval and his people. Okay. Now, in verse 23, Avigayil sees David, and she goes down off of the donkey, and she falls down, and she bows down to David. And she bows to his legs, and she says, the sin is mine, my fault. I'm sorry. Let me speak before you. Now, it wasn't true. It wasn't her fault, but she did that to kind of get David's attention. And listen. And then in verse 25, she says, and my master, don't put it on your heart. This person, this evil Belial, this evil, disgusting guy, her husband, Naval, because just like his name, that's what he is. He's a Navala. He's he's like a carcass. Okay, so don't get so angry at him. He's a bad guy, Kishmo, that's what he is. That's what he is. And I, your servant, I didn't see that your men had come. I'd seen I'd send something. And now I want you to go, and I want you not to go and to kill him. Okay? And now she says something that's unbelievable. She says, in verse 26, she says, I want to protect you from mibo b'dami, from doing the sin of blood. But it's plural, bloods. She's saving David from two acts of blood we're going to see in a second. So much so the Talmud says that Avigayil was better to David than all the offerings in the world. What she protected him from doing was she saved him from everything. So I'm taking it from blood. And now it's like this. And now it should be, your enemies should be like Naval. All your enemies should be like Naval. Everyone who tries to hurt you should be like Naval. Now, she was prophesizing here. Can anyone guess what she was prophesizing? Your enemies should be like Naval. She was prophesizing, don't do anything. Hashem's going to kill Naval. Naval's going to die very soon. So much so that one of the commentaries says that David at this point thought she was already saying he was dead. But she said, your enemies will be like Naval, and means she was prophetically telling him Naval's a dead man. Don't do anything. And your enemies will fall just like he's going to fall. Okay? And now he goes and says in 27, she says to him, and now you should be blessed. And you give food to your servants, okay? And don't go and kill him. She's pleading for her evil husband now, okay? And she says that Hashem is going to do things for you. You're going to become the king, because he's not officially the king yet, really, okay? And you have no problems. And that everyone's going to come and try to destroy you. They're gonna meet their end, and your soul will be still tied in the bond of life. Here she goes through a really deep Kabbalistic discussion about the world to come. By the way, I'm not going to get into that now, but we learn out sources from what she said about Sror Chaim. She's actually one of the proofs brought for where the Torah talks about the afterlife is actually here. And she talks about another punishment of evil people, and your enemies will be in this punishment, and you'll be bound the bond of life. Okay. All right, and God will make you the king of Israel. Okay, now I want you to concentrate here, because now it's going to start getting fascinating. In verse 31, she says, and this should not be to you lefuka. This should not be a stumbling block for you. Okay, this time, another thing will be a stumbling block. Maybe you'll have some mistakes in your life, but this one shouldn't be a stumbling block. Okay, now the simple meaning is what? You shouldn't kill a person for no reason. But there's something else that she means also here, which I'm going to explain in a moment. Okay, and then she ends her whole soliloquy with this following line. She says, you should go, and this should not be a stumbling block for you, to kill someone for no reason. And Hashem and Loshia Adonilo, and Hashem should save you and do good for you. And then the last line says, V'zacharta es amasecha. You should remember your handmaiden. Now, what was she saying? What was she saying there? So the simple meaning is she was saying, okay, when you become the king, as I told you, she prophesies that things will work out. You'll be the king. You won't be killed by Shaul. When you become officially the king, remember me. Remember the good I did. The Talmud says she was saying something else. And I want to explain a little bit about this whole discussion. Now I'm going to bring you into the Talmudic explanation of some of these words here. Avigayil, when I'm now going to explain what as the Talmud says. She comes along to stop David from killing her husband. Now, remember, her husband is a jerk. He's like the worst guy in the world. But it's her husband. And she's going to do whatever she can to save his life, which I'm going to say is the right thing to do, even though he's a terrible guy. That's what she does. She goes to save his life. Now, it says before we mentioned, now, why would David think he can kill her husband? And the answer is the conversation between Avigayil and David that the Talmud says, which is not in the text per se. But the Talmud says like this: she came, I said, from the hidden part of the mountain. What does that mean? The Talmud says the hidden part is the internal part, And what she was doing is she came to David and she presented, saying that she was asking a question if she was in need, if she demonstrated from the hidden parts that she had what's called a bedika, and she was saying, "Am I a woman who is menstruating or not?" Which is the halacha that there's certain colors would be yes, no, and she was her husband now. So David says to her, "Listen, what kind of question are you asking me? It's night. I can't tell you at night, right?" David was a rabbi, right? Can't tell you at night. You don't decide things at night. So she says, "And do you judge capital cases at night also? Why'd you come to kill my husband?" So he says, "Well, he doesn't have the normal laws of capital cases." Why? Because there's a special law, something called a morid malchus. And this is very important to understand. A king, we don't have the idea of kings, but if you rebel against the king could kill you on his own. He doesn't need a regular court. It's called a rebellion against the king, which throws everything into crazy. So he says he is a rebellious person against the king. He said, "Who's David? He's nothing. He's a dog. He's a Moabite. He's not even proper." So that is rebellion against me as the king. She says to him, "Listen, but you're not the king yet." Shaul's still a king. She says, "Yeah, but I was anointed by Shmuel, which people knew." And there's even a medrash that says that Naval said, "Ah, it was Shmuel. Shmuel had just passed away. It was the morning time of Shmuel, and he disregarded the whole thing of Shmuel." And remember, he's from the same tribe as David. So now he says. So David says, he's deserving death. I'm allowed to kill him because he's rebelling against me, and I've been anointed by the prophet Shmuel. So she says, "But people don't know you yet. It may be true. You may be technically right. You can kill him, but you are now going to be in a situation where your whole kingdom afterwards will be tainted by this situation." People say, "Yeah, he killed him." And she says, "Don't do it. Don't do it." And she tells him prophetically, this is how we know she's a prophetess, tells him prophetically that he's going to be dead anyway. As I said to you before, he said, all your enemies should be like him. She already said that she saw that he was going to die. That is the way the Talmud says. Now, Talmud says something else here, which is even stranger. The Talmud says, I'm going to basically quote you the way Talmud says it. It says that when she came there, she revealed her shok, her thigh. Seemingly, the simple explanation is not on purpose. Like, I guess when she was getting off the donkey, she revealed her thigh, and somehow David was, I don't say overcome, because the text says, whatever this means, he went to the light of her thigh for 3 parsecs, like 3 miles, to more than a mile. Now, the Medrash says then, the Talmud says that David actually said, "I want to have relations with you." Whoa. How could King David say that? She's a married woman. So a couple explanations possibly. One is, I quoted you before that some people, that David understood that the husband was dead already when she said the curse that he's going to die. I know I prophetically he's going to die. That's one explanation. Maybe another explanation is David had already judged him as a mor b'malchus, a dead man, which the king could do, and he's already dead. That's what it means when she says to him, "Let this not be a stumbling block for you." There's going to be another stumbling block in a very similar scenario you're going to have, David. You know what that is? That's going to be the problem of Bathsheba. Okay? So you're going to have a stumbling block of Bathsheba in the future. Let this not be the problem. And that's why it says that he prevented her from bloods, 2 bloods. One would have been being with her, and one would have been killing of her husband. So this is a very bizarre thing. Now, I think I yelled to ask the question she posed a second ago about the thigh. Now, again, the simple explanation I said is that she got off the donkey, and she, inadvertently something became revealed. But the words are so amazing because the words doesn't say David just lusted her. It said he went to her light for miles, which is strange language. So I'm going to tell you something here, like a little bit more based on the Kabbalists say, and it's true. It doesn't take away from the simple explanation of the text that she revealed something. But the Kabbalists say that the thighs are always, the legs always refer to prophecy. It's called in Kabbalah netzach and hal. It means a person, like when you have the legs take you to where you have to go. And the prophets take the words of Hashem and they bring it out to the world. So one of the commentaries say he saw her prophetically. He realized who she was. She basically now showed him this prophecy. He'll become the king. Naval's going to die. He's going to do some other sin in the future with a woman that's going to be questionable if she's married or not. And she basically blew him away. Okay. Now, that's the story. Now, I got one last bit, and then we're going to understand Avigayil and who she was and some about her. The last line is very strange. She says, remember your handmaiden. Now, the simple explanation, she's saying, listen, you'll become the king, and one day you'll do me a favor. But the Talmud said she was saying something else. The Talmud gives an example, just a couple examples. One thing it says is like, sometimes if you're crocheting, and you can keep talking while you're crocheting. And the Talmud says that as she was saving her husband's life, and she already prophesied he's going to die, she's telling David, and remember me, if you're interested in me. That's why the pasuk afterwards, if you look at the verse afterwards in 32, when it says Avigayil's name, it's missing the yud. It doesn't write her full name. And it says Avigayil. One explanation is because even though, we'll see in a second, she was doing this noble thing with saving her husband, and we don't see it as a sin that she mentioned herself to David, but it was something like a little bit sketchy. Like she realized, he's going to die, and she kind of mentioned to David, they felt something there, and she mentioned something, so that was crossing some kind of line, and her name is now written missing the yud.
Okay. Wait, can you explain that again? I didn't understand.
Yeah, she basically knew that he was gonna die, and she went to save his life. But then she said to David, "Remember me," meaning like, if after he dies, you're interested in me, remember me. That's the deeper. I'm not saying the words were said that. The words were said, very, very. When the rabbis say these things, they always picking up at a more subtle level. On the external level, she was just saying, and when you become the king, remember what I did and do good for me. But there's a subtle place where she was inserting herself as a possible match.
Is that before or after the tie?
Before after the what?
Is that before or after she showed the tie?
After. But again, the showing of the thigh, as I said to you before, the simple meaning is not intentional. She have the horse, the donkey, but the deeper meanings also is that she showed something much deeper prophetically that David saw. That's a deeper meaning when she showed her thigh. Okay, that's the story of Avigayil. Now, what happens then in the verse is David says to her, "Wow, you saved me, and you saved me from this sin," and he thanks her. And so on and so forth. And then what happens is she goes back. She goes back in verse 36. She goes back to her husband, and he's drunk. He's like had this party, and he's really, really drunk. And what she does is she doesn't say anything until he's drunk. The next day, when he's he's sober, she tells him, "Listen, this happened last night. David was coming to kill you, and I went and I gave him the stuff." Now, the text says his heart turned into stone. He got sick. Now, why does heart turn to stone? Like she told him, hey, you're a rich guy, I gave some of your stuff. And there's two explanations. One simple explanation is because he got scared. David was coming to kill him. Maybe he'll still come and kill him. That's the simple explanation. The deeper explanation is, it says that he was so bothered that she took the stuff, saved his life, but that he had to give David some stuff. He was so bothered by it, he turned to stone. And he was sick for 10 days. And the sages tell us those are 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It says for Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah. The 10 days for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and then he was judged, and then he died. And after he died, it said that David sent his men and he asked Avigayil to marry him. He takes Avigayil. Now, it says that when he took Avigayil, he did not have relations with her for 3 months. Anyone know why? Because she shouldn't get married before 3 months because we don't know who the kid will belong to. So he takes her, but he doesn't. I guess he doesn't. I don't know if he completes the marriage. Certainly doesn't consummate the marriage. 3 months later, he has relations with her. He marries her, has relations with her, and they have a child. Now, what's the child's name? So the text that gives us a name, but in the book of Chronicles, if you remember, it's a different name. It says, calls him Daniel. Here it calls him Kalav. Kalav, which is the word kol av, all father. Okay, all father. Why? Because it says that people started to say that this kid is not from David, it's from Naval. So Hashem made it that just like the story of Yitzchak, he looked exactly like David. Now I want to get back to this guy Kalav soon, because Kalav is actually one of the 4 people in history that never sinned. So we'll get to the son of Avigayil and David in a moment. But that is the story of Avigayil. Very, very strange story. It's a very weird story because, like, I don't know, does it sound like she did the right thing, wrong thing, what she do? She's prophetic. I want to explain something like really fascinating to understand about Avigayil. And I started this discussion like this. I mean, she's so great. How she get stuck with this guy is hard to know. It's hard to know what technically happened, how it happened. If I had to guess, I haven't seen the source of it. I had to guess, I would say this guy had tremendous potential. He was from Kalev. He was from a descendant of a great, great person. The line of the kings also. He had tremendous potential. And maybe with his wealth, he became other than what he should have been. And now she's stuck in this situation. Now, I want to ask you a question. What at this point would you do? Or what should a person do? She's stuck with a husband that is so evil, she says it straight out. His name is Naval. He's a disgusting, disgraceful person. What should she do? I mean, that's her husband, but
why didn't she divorce him? She probably have a cause to divorce him. He goes against Torah. He probably abusing her too. Like,
no, I don't know. I don't know why she didn't divorce him. Again, it would have to be done. She'd have to have this, that. I don't know. I don't know what his sins were. I don't know if she would have a valid thing to demand that or not. I don't know. But she doesn't divorce him, whatever reasons, I don't know. And now she comes to save his life. But I want to tell you something. This is fascinating because there's no way that she wasn't David's soulmate. Now, you have to understand this because, we normally talk about soulmates as one-to-one, which is the normal way it is. That's what it normally is. And the deeper meaning of soulmates is it's one soul that's a male, female, that's separated into two, and it comes together. But by a king has the ability to have numerous wives, and she's David already has a wife. I mean, she knows that. She is agreeable to that, and she's taking that position. To understand how exactly that works. But I want to get back into this thing about her being with a man that was so bad. And now she goes and she pleads for his life. Do you think that's the the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do? What do you guys think? I'll hear it as an open discussion at this moment. Do you think that, she knows her husband is David's in a conflict? Do you think that what she did was the right thing, the wrong thing, great thing, not a great thing? What do you think about? And please feel free to talk now. What do you think it is that she went to defend her husband? I want to hear people's thoughts. What do you guys think?
I think she was
Um,
Hashem.
She was
She
what?
knew. I think she knew he was going to die because she was a prophetess, and she was doing the right thing by saving him from that bloodshed.
Okay, good. So she's doing the right thing. She's doing the right thing. Okay, good. Now, and what about the part where she mentions herself to David to remember me afterwards? What do you guys think about that?
so
Could it
maybe,
be
What?
that? Oh, you can go first, Ayala. That's fine. I'm sorry.
well, I wrote in the chat, maybe she doesn't come to save his life, but David's, because she sees in prophecy that they're going to be together. And this is what leads her to talk to David also about their match, to remember her. So
So she does two things. You're right. She saves David, and she's also saving her husband. So you're right.
but in order for them to be together, her husband has to stay alive. Because if she sees in prophecy Bathsheba later on, she probably sees the connection. If he comes to kill Naval, then he takes Avigayil, then later on he kills Uriah, then he takes Bathsheba. That's not gonna work, right?
Well, it's going to work. It just won't be good, which is what she tells him. He says you're going to have a big problem. People, David never, in his life, he never got past the story of Bathsheba in terms of many of the people. Only after he died, Hashem showed that he was forgiven. But throughout his life, people still kept trying to say things against him. So yeah, for sure, she was helping him. First, she was helping him. Now, I want to explain something anyone want to add anything about these two parts of the Avigayil story, which is the one part about saving her husband, and the second part about making herself like available to David, which as I mentioned to you, the text changes her name afterwards to show that it wasn't that it was considered wrong, but she was still married, even though he was a terrible guy and he was dying, and she didn't say, hey, remember me. She didn't do that. But in the sense of like being overt about it, I'm sure it's a very subtle subconscious level of some sort, because she did come for the sake of her husband, as Andrew said before. She came really to help her husband. That was her primary goal, seemingly. So
I have a quick question, Rabbi.
Please.
So I feel like there's this assumption that because she's a prophetess, somehow it makes her decision-making process much easier. But is that necessarily the case? Like, just because you have the ability to prophesy something, then it's like, oh, you have like a pass. Like, it's like, oh, everything's easier.
Great question. Very, very important question. I really should have answered that when Ayala said that. So thank you for adding that. Because on one hand, I want to answer this is a very important question, because on one hand, yes, prophecy, what it does is it's a world of clarity. So I would ask you a silly question. How come in the first temple, when we had prophecy and the world was so clear, they made so many terrible sins? The answer is that even if you are a prophet, you are going to have your appropriate tests. And thank you, Raven. So it doesn't say when he was going to die. The commentary says, Lo yarich yomim, you won't have a long life. I don't know if it would be 10 days or a year or 2 or 5. I don't know. I don't know if she knew that. She knew that he was going to die. And the way the text says it, won't have a long life. Now, I want to say something very, very deep a second. This I'm going to tie to him. We'll open up to more questions. But I want to teach something. Honestly, there are parts of this that are very rooted in Kabbalah, to the point where I found a commentary that I can't say what I'm about to say. Okay? So I can't tell you the parts that I'm not going to tell you. I'll tell you the parts I can. But I saw something explaining who Avigayil and her neshama, and where she was and who she was, and it says not to reveal it. So I won't say God forbid the things I can't say. I'll try to say things I can say. So I want to tell you something. But even what we're going to say, which is brought in other commentaries, not just the Arizal, is so amazing, so fascinating, that I think that the basic idea and what I think the greatness of Avigayil is, and the lesson for her is going to come out through this idea. The word Naval, and he was a bad guy. If you flip the letters around, you know what it spells? It spells the word Lavan. Yes, the commentaries tell us that Naval was the soul, the neshama of that evil guy named Lavan. And he was going through a process of being fixed up. And he came out in this guy Naval. Now that now starts to like blow my mind a little bit, because Avigayil's marrying this person. He's potentially something big. Lavan is was the head honcho on the other side. And now he's coming to the Jewish aspect of whatever this means. But I'm not getting into souls. We don't know what I measure souls, what it means. But somehow Lavan is coming back in this guy Naval. Now, if you remember, when Yaakov had to watch Lavan's sheep, so it says that, I don't get into all the ideas, but he was really guarding the sheep because there were some good qualities he was still pulling out of Lavan in his possessions. And therefore, it's not an accident that David was also guarding Naval's sheep. He was protecting the sheep. That's what he said. So it's really like a replay of what happened a long time ago. Now, what was therefore Avigayil's situation is, for whatever reason, she married this guy who had this tremendous potential. In the line of Kalev, line of the kings. He has this soul, but he does not become the good guy. And she's like trapped. She's literally the most beautiful, brilliant prophetess, and she's trapped in this situation. And now I just don't even know how to think about it when you imagine, like, she must in some place in herself realize that she has a connection to King David. She realizes it. I mean, she's a prophet. She has to have, and she sees what David's response is to her. David is pursuing her to whatever that means. And she's like, hey, this is not the way to go about it. I mean, she saved the king because of who she was. So the Talmud says she was greater than David in all the offerings in the world. She was so smart and so tuned in that she actually was meant for David. She was stuck in this hard situation and she didn't jump the gun. If you understand that almost every sin we talk about of great people in Jewish history was never they did the wrong thing just straight out. It was the right thing at the wrong time. It says that if Adam didn't eat the fruit, if he waited till Shabbos, God would have let him eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and it would have all been for good. He did it in the wrong time. David, it says, he knew Bathsheba was his soulmate, but he did it before. How easy it is for us to be patient. Patience is so hard. You want to be someplace, you want to do something, and you're not there yet. And people make mistakes. We mentioned a couple of weeks ago also with Potiphar's wife and Yosef. He did see he was connected to this woman. She's trying to seduce him every day. She sees somehow she's connected to him. He sees it too, but he's like, I can't go outside the boundaries of what is right. And that's why Avigayil's level of righteousness is so incredible, because she's stuck in this dynamic, like the sheep of Lavan. She's stuck with this guy Naval, whatever the deeper levels of her soul, why she's there. But she knows the right thing is to save her husband because he's her husband now. And she does it. That's what she does. She does the right thing because it's right. You know how many times in our lives, and I don't know about you, I know for myself, I really need to catch myself when you make calculations about bigger things that may be right, instead of having a simple approach. I got to do what's right. The ends justifying the means is a really bad rationalization to do things that are not good. It really is. And that's where people with good intentions fool themselves. Avigayil, I don't know what I would say. I don't know. I'm not a wife. And I mean that in the most beautiful way. There's something very powerful about the quality of a wife. I mean, I'm a husband. I try to be a great husband, but I don't know if you're living with this guy who is so bad and he just dug his own grave and you have a way out. Do you take it? No, you do what's right. And that's why coming to save Naval's life, and then people added beautifully that she's also saving David, but she's not doing it for any ulterior motive. She's doing it because it's the right thing. And that's why even at the end, what she mentions to David, she knows David, she's connected, she feels it, she knows it. And she knows Naval is over. Maybe she shouldn't have even said it. And maybe that's why the sages, say that they take out the yud of her name, say maybe you shouldn't have said it. But there was no sin involved here because it was all totally doing what was right because it's right. It's a famous line that I want to repeat to you that the Rambam says, Maimonides says, and we have to live by this. He says, Osa emes, nipeshu emes, v'sova tov alav v'gula. A person does truth because it's true. And in the end, the good will come because of it. You can't justify the ends and do something because I have a good rationale. My husband's in Russia and this and that. On the deepest level, that's her soul had to go through this process. She literally was beauty, wisdom, prophecy trapped by Lavan. Wow. Trapped. Like Rachel and Leah were trapped by Lavan, and Yaakov had to pull him out. She was this incredible woman that was trapped by this guy Naval, and she said, I'm not being calculated, I'm doing what's right. And when she does, then what was supposed to happen, when it was supposed to happen, did. Her husband died in 10 days. She did all the things that were right. She saved him. He died on his own. Nothing to do with anything that she had complicity in. And then David, knowing her greatness, takes her as his wife. And I mentioned before their child Kalav. The Talmud says there were 4 people in history that never did anything wrong. Only 4 people. That's not a lot, right? Even the greatest made mistakes. There was Binyamin. There was Amram, Moshe's father. There was Yishai, David's father. And one of David's kids, that was this child, Kalav, the child of Avigayil. And I want to say, based on what we're saying tonight, that's because it wasn't just her brilliance and her beauty and everything. There was a sense of, I am going to do what's right. I don't always know the bigger calculation. You don't know what your soul is. We don't know anything. I revealed a little bit of who her soul was. A little bit I revealed, and that her soul was stuck in this connection of sorts, and it had to be pulled out. But no, none of us here know. We don't know where our souls have been. We don't know why we go through the things we go through in life, and we have to believe that all the things we go through are in for a purpose that is good, and if we get bitter about our situation, yes, Ayel's questions in the beginning was right. Could divorce, should divorce. We have these ideas. The Christians for years didn't have idea of divorce. It didn't happen. We have, yes, there is a possibility, and if things aren't right, things are wrong. It's a mitzvah to get divorced. God forbid. If it says the altar cries. It's a terrible, terrible thing. We want to avoid it at all costs. But there's a time sometimes, but for whatever reason she didn't. Whatever, that wasn't her situation, and she dealt with that. That's the beauty and brilliance of Avigayil. It's knowing what to do and when to do it, and having the trust in Hashem that if you do what's right, in the end, the things will work out as they're supposed to. Okay, let's open it up to some questions on this.